Good morning. Thank you for connecting into our training webinar on our quarter closing and reporting process. Just a few things before we get into our material. The GoToWebinar does mute all the phones by default. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the questions or chat area, and I'll see those pop up throughout our session. I'll try and answer any questions while we're on specific topics. If you have any issues with your audio, sometimes depending on your internet connection, the computer audio can cut in and out. The phone call is sometimes better if you are having issues with that. Otherwise, it's kind of hard for me to diagnose the sound options. I can kind of see it coming through on my end. Can't really control your side, so just kind of that's just a little heads up there. Sometimes if you are having issues with the computer audio, click into the audio and go to the phone call. The other thing with the GoToWebinar is there's a handout section, and that has the material that we will be covering today. I believe I also attached this in the email, but I will send it again when this session is over. I will send out the recording, link to the recording. So I will attach that in the email again when I send that email. All right, so let's get started. One of the things that Datatech Software requires is a closing process at the end of a quarter. So you don't have to do all of the reports, but the program does have a current quarter year, and when you print checks, it has to be within that current quarter. So most of you have finished up your last payroll for March. So next week will be your first check dated in April. And so all of our quarter and also the year-end reporting is based on check date. So we are now at this transition of ending the first quarter. Next week, your checks printed in April will be in the second quarter. So to do this process, oh, and one thing with the material here, the material has some year-end items on it. So we're actually going to be starting with the quarter closing, which is on page 21 if you're following along. So to go through this closing process, it just takes a couple minutes. You're going to go on your payroll menu to the Payroll Tax Reports Control Center. And we're just stick in our year 2024 and then whatever the current quarter is. For example, this webinar, we're doing the quarter one, so we select quarter one. The first report that it's going to run is called the Wage Detail Report. What this report is a printout of totals that are located in the employee file. So as you do checks throughout the year, the check wages are updated to this quarter-to-date total section and year-to-date total section. What happens with this closing process is these quarter-to-date totals are then copied to an archive record. So we keep our quarter reporting totals in a separate archive file, and that's what this closing process is doing, is copying these totals to a separate file. So this is just comparing what are the totals in the employee files, 53,185.12 here in my files. And then next we do a payroll journal. And this payroll journal is just comparing the totals in the check file. So if there's any discrepancies, we can go ahead and fix them before we create this archive. And when you're looking at this, you're actually looking at the third column here, check total, to our quarter-to-date total here on our wage detail report. But that's what the program is doing for you on this window, is it's displaying them, and it will actually not proceed with the archive process if those totals don't match. And let me just show you what happens if those totals don't match, because the program will go through and recalculate them. It'll correct them for you. So you should never do this, but I'm just going to manually change one of my employees so that now his employee file totals don't match his check. So this is what the program will automatically detect if there's any issues between what it's going to move to the archive and the check file. So if you get that message, it's perfectly fine. I'll ask you, the wage detail report and payroll journal don't agree. Employee totals may need to be corrected. Proceed, and we just go ahead and say yes. And then the program's going to go ahead and run this fix employee totals, recalculate the totals in the employee file. Because again, that's what's going to be copied to the archive. So then we just go ahead and start over. You can see our check marks here have been removed. We do our wage detail report again and our payroll journal. Now our totals match, and we can proceed with the archive print clear button. If you have any issues with employee Social Security numbers, there will be a printout at this time so you know who has invalid Social Security numbers. If these employees are still working, you want to do your best, make your best effort to correct those Social Security numbers. If you correct Social Security numbers in the employee file, it will update the archive file that will be used to actually create the quarterly report. So we recommend trying to make as many corrections as possible before you do those reports. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but if you report under an incorrect Social Security number and then you get their corrected number, you do have to file an adjustment with the EDD in California. And depending on your other states, if we have ones in Washington or Oregon, you may have the same situation. So the program is just running through the rest of the process on its own. You are now done when you have received the message that the quarterly totals have been cleared and the current quarter has been moved forward. So in this case, this quarter, we've moved forward to quarter 2. That's all you have to do. And like I said, this afternoon or this morning, if you want to do that while we're on this webinar, then you are good to go. You're ready to cut checks next week. Okay. Any questions just on that process? Okay. Not too hard, but it is required. So now, again, you have the month of April to make any corrections. If you have any corrections to Social Security numbers, or if you have any corrections to voiding checks, anything like that, you take your time to review the reports before you submit them. So what we'll do now is actually look at those reports. So the first one, the majority of our session today is in California. In California, you file a DE9 and a DE9C, but they are both electronic files. They will be uploaded through the EDD's e-services website. So since I'm still on this window, I can come and just click the State Reports button. But if you're coming back to this later in the month, you just come back into the Payroll Tax Reports Control Center, and you just stick in the quarter and year again to open your totals, and then click the State Reports button. Now, while I'm here, I will also mention that this State Reports is also used to generate the Oregon reports that are used on the New Francis online reporting system. This is also used for Washington to do your unemployment reporting to the Unemployment Securities Department. So first, just start with California. We put in our state. And then with California, we're generating an electronic file. So we mark the Generate Electronic File button. The program will display your current state unemployment rate. If you forgot to update this, like maybe you got started up and you didn't have your EDD notice handy and you didn't have the correct SUI rate in the system, you can change it here, but this does not change the state tax rate tables. So if this is incorrect, you also want to go to your payroll menu and then under Setup, your state tax rate tables. Bring up your state and then go to Other Withholding Settings. That's where your SUI rate is located. You can update that, enter it in as a decimal. Okay. So what the program does is it does give you a printed copy of the old DE9 the way it looked on paper in the DE9C. So if you want to go ahead and put your payments into the form, just so it's on your printout, you can go ahead and type in your payments here. It's not required for the electronic file, but it puts it onto the form for you. Now, if you use Datatech's accounting system to keep track of your payments, then you can hit the List Payment button. And just some things to keep in mind is that sometimes a payment in January might have been for the prior quarter, for last fourth quarter. And you may also need to go a week ahead and look into April for any payments for your last March payroll. So I actually haven't recorded any payments in here this year, but if I go take out my dates or maybe pull up a different vendor, this will show any payments that you have entered into the system. You just type those in. You can also go online to the EDD and download your payment history if you're not using our software. Or if you're using QuickBooks or something else, you can go run your payment list there. So just go ahead and preview. It'll bring up our company information. You may just want to review this, make sure everything is correct. For the state form, you don't need the federal, worry about the federal and the BSO user ID. Those are used at the end of the year for the W-2 file. But mainly your address, contact information, your state ID, you can review there. So the program is going, as I mentioned, to create those files for you. So it will generate a printout, like I mentioned, with the old form, what the old DE9C and DE9 looks like on paper. But it's also going to do something that's going to give you a last page of the preview. We'll have the path to those files. So if you don't want to print the whole thing, what I recommend is going here. You can see how many pages you have, and at least print out that last page. I believe when you go and upload these files, it will ask you for some of these totals information. So you can see if I go back a page, this is the equivalent of the printed DE9. Like I said, if you put your total payments in there, it will print that on line I and calculate the amount. And the rest of it is just our reported totals. So you may just want to keep the PDF of this. I definitely recommend you are supposed to keep these tax reports on file. So if you don't want to print the whole thing on paper, at least create a folder somewhere where you keep these documents. Now, I don't have, the ability to go online and go through the state's website, but if you have not done the upload before, what I recommend is go to our training videos, and under the specialized payroll training, you'll find the quarterly videos, and these will take you through the EDD website. Goes through the creation process first, and then the website will be in the latter half of the video. Okay. Any questions on the DE9, DE9C? Okay. The other thing I would just mention here too is when you are going through this process, if it is the end of the month and you want to make sure, if you've done any corrections, that these totals are correct, you can go back and review the archive reports and any other payroll reports. So for example here, you may notice that these totals are different than my closing window. Well, that's because I have done other states. So this is just our totals for California. So I may want to go back and run the archive report. Actually, we can do that from the quarterly tax reporting menu. And then when we do it from the quarterly tax reporting menu, we can choose a state. So if you're multi-state, you may want to do that. Daisy, if you want to go ahead and type in your question, your microphone, I can't unmute. If you want to just type it in. While she's doing that, the other thing that you may need to review is if you have pre-tax wages. You may want to review the taxable amount. So if you notice here, I have wages for the quarter, $46,166, but my wages subject to state withholding is $46,046. So that may be certain employees have 401k or cafeteria plans that are not subject to withholding. So one of the things that you can do is you can use your payroll journal or your employee earnings record and include the wage type totals. So we can review which of the wages are being excluded from taxable wages. So, and again, depending on which state I have, I can run for different states and review that. But then we know that these amounts will be coming off our taxable wages. Just a question. So Daisy, your question, I might have to look at the report. Depending, again, on what has been withheld and which columns you're looking at. Your question was about the wage detail report not seeing anything for federal and state. If you haven't had any withholding, then it may be that it's zero if employees have not, had any withholding. Or depending on employees, some of our customers are doing H-2A and they are exempt from withholding, but it's still reported as income tax. But if it's a different column, you can send the report over to me and I can look at it like your specific situation, see what you're looking at. Any other questions? So as I mentioned briefly, we just have one or two in other states in our session today. So for Oregon, you'll do the same process. You'll put in Oregon, and then you notice it kind of even removes the bottom part because it's not used. For Oregon's report, it brings up another window where you can put in any prepayments for the taxes. And then it will give you a paper copy of the Schedule B, and then I didn't do any. It will generate the file. Oh, did I do the wrong quarter again? Oops. Quarter 4. I was like, I thought I did Oregon. Quarter 1. Let's try that again. There we go. I had one employee there. I put some wages in. So it will give you the printed form, so you know when you upload the files what the totals will be. Also, there's certain things that don't import, so if you have to complete the Schedule B, this will give you all of the totals, but you do have to go online and input them in. And then based on your payments, it will complete the OQ form. And we have a similar video on our website for uploading Oregon to the Francis website. Now, one of the reasons why we have this Oregon video is because we have a remote worker in Oregon, so we recorded our payroll manager filing her Oregon payroll. We don't have a similar video on Washington, but as I mentioned, it does the same thing. When you do Washington, it generates a CSV file that you'll upload to the Unemployment Security Department. Now, Washington also has separate reporting for the family and medical leave and long-term care and your industrial insurance. So actually, I don't see the Washington's in our session today, but we'll have this recording. So both of these are CSV files. Actually, no, the family medical leave and LTC combined is a CSV file. And this one, it does allow you to select your location. So you could go ahead and put it in the same location like we're talking about, which is your company files. And then there's a Magnedia folder for all of the different quarters in your reporting. And then you just hit export. And it's a very simple CSV file. And then you'll upload that through their website. And the industrial insurance just puts all of your information into a paper form that you can print on the paper if you submit by paper, or you can take these numbers and put them in online. And if you need to review anything with your L&I setup or these totals, where they're coming from, feel free to email our training email, and then we'll connect with those individually to assist you with any review of that process. Again, since most of our customers in our session today are in California, I don't want to spend too much time on those. Now, The last few things that you may need to do at the quarter end is one, if you have regular employees, then you also need to fill out the federal form 941. So the difference is if you categorize somebody as regular, you have to report their federal taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and withholding quarterly, versus if they're categorized as agricultural, then they get reported at the end of the year. They're all the same taxes, everything's no different, but just when they're reported. So when you open the 941, and if you're doing it from the quarterly tax reporting menu, you want to make sure you go to the one that says 2024, because they've changed this form a lot throughout COVID, pre-COVID, during COVID, and now they've kind of gone back to the old form, 2024. The other thing is that if you have regular employees and you're doing the 941, we will have an update next week because we are changing this form. And if this doesn't apply to you, just stay on for a few more minutes. We just have a couple more things to go through. So again, if some of this, I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but just hang with me for a few more minutes. So when you do the 941, you want to hit calculate totals, and that will bring in the wages. And this doesn't match my other wages because most of my employees are agricultural. I'll report them at the end of the year. These are just the employees categorized as regular. You can do the same process as doing the list payments. So if you're recording your payments through our system, you can go in and review the vendor inquiry to total those payments. And then once you have those payment amounts, they go here into 13A, total deposits for quarter in, oops, wait, nope, I need to move my screen. Yeah, I just had something that I was thinking was a different place. Now, one of the things with the federal form is they do give you an allowance for adjustments. So for any reason, if what you paid was slightly off in line 7, you can put in adjustments to the total taxes to balance out to your payments. You can't do huge adjustments, but if it's just pennies, usually there's some rounding on those. You can use that line to adjust. So then we just click continue. You'll put in your state where your state income tax deposits were made. And then for the liability, there's 2 buttons here. You first click update tax liability to calculate the liabilities for each month. And then again, for rounding purposes, because we want this to match our, actually line 10, our total taxes, we hit adjust. And what that will do is that will adjust those amounts. I don't know why it's doing an extra deal there. I'll have to talk to the programmer about that. Then on the bottom section, you can fill in if you are a third-party preparer, paid preparer info. Otherwise, you just go ahead and hit preview. And I didn't put my bitmaps in. Oh, I should. Let me just go do our 2023. So I say the programmers are still doing our final adjustment. And then once we have the update and the bitmap, then that will print out onto the form. And then you just mail that in. If you are a semi-weekly depositor for 941, most of you probably are not. If any of you have 941, it's probably just a few employees. So whichever schedule you are reporting on, you select that type of depositor. So if we do the monthly, then it'll fill in the monthly. If you're semi-weekly, you do have to click on the Schedule B and print that out from the Schedule B tab. Any questions on the 941? Okay, so a lot of our customers make payments weekly for all your taxes, your 943, 941, your state taxes, and also the 940, which is the federal unemployment. But we do have some that do make those 940 quarterly. So just to review, one of the ways of looking, before I go on, there was the question. We do not currently e-file the 941, Aurelia. It's something we're looking at doing, but to e-file, you have to be set up, with the IRS as a filer. There's a whole process that our customers would have to go through to enroll, which I know you might, as I think you're in a payroll service or bookkeeping. But so right now we just do the paper, and you can send it in, or I believe there's a way you can just go online and type in the totals, but we don't create the electronic file for the 941 right now. Okay. So if you need to review your payments for the 940 and make a quarterly payment, or it may just be something that you want to audit, make sure that you haven't missed any payments, you're on track with your 940 and possibly 943 taxes. You can go in on your payroll reports menu to the wage and tax summary and put in your totals or your dates for the quarter. And this will give you all of the taxes that you owe. So one of the things I wanted to mention during this webinar is if you are currently not seeing the credit reduction, you may want to make a change to your file settings. So if you're not familiar with what the credit reduction is basically we get a credit towards federal unemployment because we're paying into state unemployment. You don't really see it, but technically that's what's happening. And California had to borrow from the federal government to cover all of their unemployment claims during the pandemic. And so now as businesses, since the government hasn't paid back those monies, we have to pay it back. But the IRS allows states a period of time to pay it off each year. If it's not paid off by November, then we have the credit reduction for the full year. And it's getting high. It goes up 0.3% every year those loans aren't paid off. So as of now, for 2024, the additional credit reduction for California is, I think it's 0.9. So it's actually more than the unemployment tax itself. You're going to pay more than double. So it's really important if you don't get behind on that. So like in this example, my base FUI is $46. my additional is 56. I just have very small payrolls here in these training files, but you can imagine yours will be double plus. And this again, if you're multi-state, that's not exactly 0.9% because I have payroll in other states, so it doesn't apply to Washington, Oregon. It's just the California payroll. So if you are not seeing this on your wage and tax summary, I would go in to your tools menu and then program setup. And under the payroll tab, you turn on this accrue credit reduction tax with FUI. And that will turn it on so it'll accrue with your payroll journal, and you'll see it on the wage and tax summary report. And if you need to make up any extra payments, once you turn that on, you'll see what your total is so far. And you can catch up any payments. Now, technically, it's not due because they don't say for sure if the states are going to have that tax until November. The credit reduction is not actually due until your fourth quarter payment, but California has already said they're not going to have the loans paid off for a few years, so we're almost 100% sure it's going to apply. So it's up to you if you'd like to make up those payments throughout the year so that you don't have this big hit in January. Okay. I know that's a complicated thing, and you can go to our blog to read up more on that if you are not familiar with those, how that works. Okay. We did have a question about making sure that employees are classified as ag. The easiest way to do that is go on your payroll menu to employee list, and then run the abbreviated detail list, and click the employee type regular, and then you can see if you have anyone categorized there as regular that shouldn't be. If you do have somebody classified that shouldn't be, let me see, it gives you a warning, but one of the things, if you need to change this, I would go ahead and call our support department. After you change them, we will run a fix on the employee totals so that those all get reflected and moved from 941 to 943. Especially if you've already closed, if you do the archive and you need to change it after, definitely give us a call to run a fix on those. Okay, so the next thing that comes up is what happens if you find after you've closed the quarter that maybe a check just shouldn't have been done at all. You want to avoid it, or you need to move checks from one employee to another, or issue a check that should have been issued, various things. Because what happens is once that's closed, the payroll, again, when you print checks, it makes sure you're printing checks and the check date is within what it calls the current quarter. So if you've closed and you want to do something again dated in March, you have to reopen. So this is found on page 73. What you do is you go on the payroll menu to utilities and then fix employee total. You click on the change quarter year tab and you put in 1/2023, and now I'm back and we're working in the first quarter again. There's just giving you a reminder that, you know, if you've already done checks in April, that we need to make sure we use this option again to correct the totals for the current year once we're done. So now I can go ahead and maybe I want to void and reissue checks, or I need to move checks. I can do that. Once I'm done, I'm going to go through that closing process again. But let me show you the move checks to new employees, something that comes up, especially when you're reviewing your quarter reports. You may find that an employee was put in without a social, then you got him, got his social, you dismissed it, put a new employee in, and you need to merge those. So you can do just one check. Sometimes when the checks get handed out, employees with similar names cross their checks, and you just need to move one check. Or you can do move by date. And we can say, Carlos, his checks actually should have gone to the other Carlos. No idea why he didn't tell us, but we want to move all the checks from one file to another. Oops, did I change that? Oh, yeah, this is, oh, I know what I did. When I did this change, I accidentally did 2023. I just wanted to go to the first quarter of 2024. Okay, now I'll be in the right quarter. So it'll move all the checks that it signed, or again, if it's just one check, you can use the one check. And that is on, I think that is covered in the beginning because it's part of something we recommend doing, again, during the oh, it's on page, like, what's right there? On page 11. This comes up a lot, you know, before you close and do W-2 as well. So if I've made those changes, I can, again, just go back to my closing control center and run through this again, but now all of those wages from Carlos are on the other account. So now it's going to update, overwrite the totals in the archive file. And then I can do my reports. And that is something that is very common. You can call our support department for help with that if you need any assistance. One of the other things that comes up with voiding checks too is if you are just voiding a check because the employee lost it, if they have wages in the current quarter and you're just reissuing it to give them a new check, then we recommend changing this void date. I haven't done checks in the new quarter, so it's going to say it's going to create negative wages, but as long as he has other wages in the current quarter, you can void in the current quarter, reissue in the current quarter, so you don't have to go back and change anything in the prior quarter. The wages stay there. That's where they were reported. The void and the reissue offset each other and just create a zero, net difference in the current quarter. Okay, so the other thing that I mentioned is if you do file your quarterly report and then you find out a Social Security number was wrong, we don't do the DE9C adjustment. So I believe there is a way to do this online and not do it on paper, but I've heard that from customers. I haven't actually used the website, but you can also do it on the paper form. If you're correcting a Social Security number, you put in the previously reported Social Security number, and you do have to fill in the wages that were on that report with the corrected Social Security number. This comes up a lot, and some of our customers don't do this, but especially end of the year, when you're getting W-2s and employees will say their social wasn't right, you are technically required, because you're only reporting in California at the quarterly level, to go back and file this adjustment for all of the quarters that were reported with the wrong Social Security number. All right, any other questions? If you need any more assistance, or some of you may be Spanish speakers and you've joined in but you would like some of this in Spanish, go ahead and email our training email, and Eliana will be setting up some appointments next week if you need assistance with this closing process. But again, the main thing is just going through that simple closing on the Payroll Tax Reports Control Center. That's all you have to do before you do checks next week. And then you have the full month to do the rest of your reporting. So that's typically what we do. If you need assistance, we'll get you through just the closing process. You can get your checks done, and then we'll make another appointment later in the month to go through the report. We did have a question of somebody just about that void check again. So when you go into the void payroll check, you are selecting the check that you need to void. And if you're reissuing it, you mark the reissue check to button. And then select the employee. In this case, maybe it's the same employee, they just lost their check. But if it was a different employee, the wrong name, you could also select a different employee there. Or if it was correcting the wages, so this sometimes is just used in the current week to correct wages, but a lot of times it's doing a lost check. If you are still within the quarter and I want to just use the original date for the void date, you can. Or what I was explaining with an old check is use a current check date as your void date. Then the void will create a negative, and when you reissue the check, it'll create a positive, and they just offset each other. I'll go ahead and do that just with the 7th. I'll use that date. So it's going to tell this isn't a prior quarter. If you've already filed, you need to do amendment, but otherwise the quarter total will be updated. If you haven't reported yet, you can void without reopening, actually. So once it voids, it will recreate the check in the batch check. So if we needed to make corrections, if we're voiding to make corrections, we can do that as well. Otherwise, we can just save this and go ahead and print up a new check. See, it closed already, so I can't state that in April. So I could use a current date here, or again, if I wanted to reopen that, do that within the quarter that it was being reissued, I could go ahead and reopen that quarter. To get my new check. And the way that looks on the payroll journal is a record that it was voided with the negatives and the new check with the new check number. So it's not affecting any taxes. So that's why if you do want to do the void and reissue data in the current quarter, you can do that. So it doesn't change any of the reported wages the original quarter that it was on. Okay. Any other? Okay. So, and then if you have any questions, like while you're doing the process that's more urgent, go ahead and email or call our support department. You can go to the support@datatechad.com email. Because with training, both Eliana and I pretty much work by appointment. So a lot of times we're on the phone, it's scheduled for an hour, 2 hours. And so when things are more like, I need help getting this done today, right now, you go to our support department, or you can call our 800 number and follow the prompts to go to the support department. All right, thank you very much for your time and attention. Like I mentioned, I will email out this video once it's processed by GoToWebinar along with the material. And we look forward to you finishing your first quarter with Datatech Software and starting the next. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.